This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Enjoyer Podcast. This is your host, James David Dixon. So happy to be with you guys. I was so happy just the other day to be up in Benzie County talking to that group of Republicans. And what I'd like to talk about with you is what I talked about with them. So if you were in Benzie County, I suppose you don't have to listen. But based on the reception to the speech, I'm thinking you will anyway, because people seem to dig it. We're going to talk about how elections have consequences and why you might think they don't. So let's think about what's happened in the Trump era, specifically this term, but also going back to the first one. We have in the first term, you saw, well, as an outgrowth of the first term, you saw Roe versus Wade. The Roe consensus on abortion, which had held for 5 decades. And for 5 decades, Democrats and Republicans both used it in their fundraising letters. They said that abortion was on the ballot. And then no matter who won or by how much, nothing would ever happen. Roe would never be codified. Roe would never be struck down. It just all stayed where it was, and everybody benefited from that consensus. Donald Trump was the guy who appointed the justices who actually changed things. And yes, that did go badly in 2022 in states like Michigan, where we ended up approving limitless abortion in response to it being kicked back to the states, in response to a default in Michigan, where it was a 1931 law that was extremely restrictive. It reflected 1931 values, and I suppose our embrace of limitless abortion as a state reflects 2022 values. Anyway, Trump pierced the Roe consensus on abortion. This is something that Republicans had talked about for decades, but not actually done. Another thing Republicans have talked about for decades, I'm going to defund Planned Parenthood. They should call it Planned Karenhood. When you think about how we talk about the Ku Klux Klan, right? Bad guys, scary guys. They went around killing and intimidating black people in the post-Civil War America. They really reversed a lot of the progress that black people were making with their intimidation campaigns. That was bad. Yeah, that was bad. I'd say killing 15,000 black babies every year in Michigan is worse. In Michigan, every single year, more black babies are killed during abortions than black people were killed during the entire reign of the Klan in its history. So the Grand Wizard is scary and obviously so, but Margaret Sanger and her ilk, including our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, including the woman trying to replace her, Jocelyn Benson, they're just as scary because they'll talk about you killing off the black community, black women killing off their own offspring, as if it's a right. As if it's a achievement of society, as if this is like some kind of noble thing to be involved in. They'll talk about it like a good thing. Woe to those who call good evil and evil good. Well, that's half the country and their politicians. And Donald Trump is the first guy to say, you know what? You guys want to have abortions? You even passed limitless abortion laws? Good on you. We can't stop you. And chances are it's not our kids being aborted. It's your kids. So the whole abortion issue, by the way, is Republicans trying to stop Democrats from killing their own kids. And on that count, a count which every Republican says is so important to them, he delivered victory. When you think about PBS and NPR and defunding those, this is something Republicans have talked about since the 70s. Since the 60s, Richard Nixon was talking about it. Ronald Reagan was talking about it. But they only took half measures and they only got part of the way there. They either didn't have the power to do the whole thing or you passed an executive order, that kind of thing. But what needed to happen is what just happened in the big, beautiful bill, the law. As a result, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the one who gets the money from the feds and distributes it to the NPRs and the PBSs of the world, they just said they're going to wind down operations. So 3 weeks ago, they were telling you this money is important, but it's not going to be the end of the world. Everyone's going to step up. Then the money source dries up once they're no longer on the taxpayer teat, and suddenly they're not able to survive. They're a corporation they claim to be. Well, do some business. Corporations do business. You guys can sell ads. Where's the corporation in it? The second your government money dries up, you go out of business. That's not very corporate, but that's what they've done. And that's the kind of thing that would have never happened decades ago. All they had to do is show a sad Elmo, show a crying Big Bird, and talk about how viewers like you would be deprived of these things. And man, okay, we're only going to cut half. We're only going to cut a quarter. We're only going to cut a little bit. Donald Trump cut the whole thing and he unplugged it from the wall. Donald Trump has ended the pillow fight in Washington. These things were all supposed to be fake. It was all supposed to only happen in newspapers, but then nothing would happen in real life. There was a whole book written about this. This guy, Thomas Frank, about 2 decades ago, wrote a book called What's the Matter with Kansas? And the theory there is that Republican voters are energized by the rhetoric of their politicians. They say they're going to ban affirmative action. They say they're going to ban abortion. They're so energized by the rhetoric that they'll vote against their own interest. And then the things that energize them don't actually get done. I think they're half right. I don't think they're voting against their own interests. But I do agree that there is a form of the okie doke that's been happening for a long time. And chances are a lot of politicians you like and have respected over the years have been in on it. I mean, let's think about the 2012 presidential election. So what was MAGA before MAGA? It was the Tea Party, right? It was the Tea Party. It was all that angst. It was all that taxed enough already. All that anger about what our government does and how much money they spend. The U.S. aid debate, what Doge just did, is really a granular version of what the Tea Party was talking about. The Tea Party was taking the macro view from 30,000 feet. Doge was getting into the details. But both of them were telling the same story, which is that our ruling class spends a lot of money. They rob from our future, but none of this helps us. None of this helps us in any way. We're putting on Sesame Street in Afghanistan. We're trying to train other countries to accept transgenderism. But we're not doing anything for the 300 million people of America. We've been taught to not think that we need these things. We've been taught to not ask for it. Ask not what my country can do for me, right? Ask what I can do for my country. Well, if you look around, your country is doing plenty for Somalians. It's doing plenty for Haitians. It's doing plenty for Mexicans and new arrivals to the country. Not so much for you. And so what I talked about last year when we had mass immigration from the Biden era, Trump ended it, but the problem back then, there was no and there is no CBP-1 app, Customs and Border Patrol. There is no CBP-1 app for Americans. There's no app you can go to and just find a bunch of help with housing. Oh, you want to move from this state to that state? We'll do it. That help's just not available. But if you're someone from the third world who comes here without a single skill, without a single dollar, without plans to add to this country in any way, you'll be given every resource to instead draw from the country and make it worse. And so Donald Trump has taken the Republican Party to the final frontier, which is nativism. So let's think about the earliest iteration of the Republican Party, right? The one that gathered in Jackson, Michigan, July 1854 under the Oaks. These are the guys who said that the Whig Party isn't quite radical enough. They're not strong enough. These are the guys who said that the free soil movement, it's a good idea, but it doesn't have enough juice, doesn't have enough buy-in. We need something different. That March 1854, these at a meeting in Ripon, Wisconsin, someone says, we do need something different. Let's call it the Republican Party. 4 months later in Jackson, they have the first ever Republican convention. What results from it is a group of Republicans who would go on to dominate Michigan, and while the Republican Party would also dominate nationally for many decades. So from July 1854, the Republican Party is founded, right, in Jackson. That year, You have the first Republican candidates to ever appear on a ballot, and they sweep. They sweep. They take the state by storm. This brand new party, who we now call the Grand Old Party, at the time, the Republicans were the upstart. In 1854, you had the Whigs and you had the Democrats. The Republicans were the new guys, and somehow throughout the mists of time, they've come to be known as the Grand Old Party. But they were the new guy back then. And what was their platform? Anti-slavery, abolition, which is good. It's Christian. It's great. But it doesn't do a whole lot for the natives of America, right? There's a lot of people in the North who never held slaves, a lot of people in the South who never held slaves, never felt strongly about it. It didn't affect their life in any way. So they must have thought, man, this is a strange basis to build an entire Republican Party around. Just like today, we say, man, it was kind of strange that the Democrats, even in places like Michigan, try reading the Detroit Free Press someday, from like the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, through the Civil War, they were as pro-slavery as you could be. This is a Democrat paper because that was the Democrat position. And yet that's fine. And that's fine. And now we're told, though, that Republicans are the real racists. Only people who don't know any of the history could believe that. But let's think about it. Republicans, when they started, anti-slavery. Republicans in their next most successful iteration. You're thinking of the same guy I'm thinking, Ronald Reagan, Saint Ronald Reagan. And what was that? That was an anti-communist party. Do you see the common thread here? Anti-slavery in the 1850s, anti-communism in the 1980s. Neither one of those are necessarily nativist sentiments. You're opposing the bad of the world, which is good. But what are you doing for the man who's here and now, who hasn't done anything wrong and has no plans on it? He just wants the government to get out of his way and maybe even help him out. We're helping so many people out. You know, America's still sending foreign aid to China? We're still sending foreign aid to our biggest rival. That's how slow things are to change, and that's how stupid the machinery is. That we're helping people who hate us and don't even need the help anymore, because that's what was done in the 60s. And it was done in JFK's day. And if the program were to go away, there'd be all these negative news articles about it. And I do find it funny that at a time when the USAID money has dried up, the NPR money has dried up, the PBS money has dried up. So USAID goes away, and suddenly these liberal causes can't fund themselves anymore. They just had, even Planned Parenthood, they just said Planned Parenthood is closing like 200 centers across America, including one in Ann Arbor, of all places, another one in Jackson. I think I saw one or two others on the list. Now, this is in a state that approved limitless abortion in 2022, and by 2025, there's so little native demand for Planned Parenthood and the eugenics it does that they can't even keep their doors open when they're disconnected from the taxpayer teat. So all these ideas you were told were just so popular and were so inevitable. And man, if you're not on board with this stuff, you're going to miss the wave. Guys, it was all fake. It was all fake. It was all AstroTurf. It was all US aid funded. So many of the protests we've seen, so many of these ideas that are unpopular, when you control the information routes, you control the media, you control academia, you can control how things are framed. The reason the Democrats and the leftist movement are doing so bad in the 2020s is we all have access to the same search bar. Authority weighs less than it ever has because of the way it's been used and abused. And so we're at this point now where the news people don't have information that you don't. Their perspectives on it don't feel true, right? And so that's why a thing like the Michigan Enjoyer exists. Because in Michigan right now, truth is a blue lake. It's wide open. There might be a little Canadian wildfire smoke in the air, but there ain't nobody else out on the water. They're writing so many fake stories at the big newspapers these days. John Engler said it best. One of my favorite governors in Michigan history, probably my favorite. Governor Engler said on this program that if you read the Detroit News and Free Press, you would not know what's happening in Lansing. He knows better than me, so I'm going to go with what the governor says. But so we've seen just in these 6 months of Donald Trump 2.0, that elections do have consequences. I'm not even going to ask you to consider what this time would have looked like if Kamala Harris had been elected. I'm just going to ask you to look at what has happened. And I'm going to ask you to understand and to see, as you read these events, that it does matter who runs things and how they run things. Now, I'd like to talk about why you might think it doesn't matter. So I think about the election that really damaged Republicans in Michigan psychologically was the 2022 election. So you come in with all this anger from the pandemic. It's your first chance, your only chance, to have a shot at Gretchen Whitmer, right? This is your chance to register your disapproval of the tyrant, the woman who shredded the Constitution, the woman who moved sick old people into a nursing home with grandma and shortened her life. This was your chance. You were mad, and the people you knew were mad. You didn't know anyone who was going to vote for Whitmer. And then election day came, and Whitmer won by 11 points. A month and a half before election day, you're reading stories about there's these Republicans for Whitmer out there crossing party lines to support her. And you're thinking, what the hell is this? But the same thing was actually happening in Lansing with the legislature. So in Gretchen Whitmer's first term, Republicans held both houses in the legislature, the House and the Senate. And in those 4 years, she signed 1,000 laws. She's not going to hit nearly that in her second term. Right now, in her 7th year out of 8, there's only been 6 laws passed, not including the budget that was due on July 1st. So just that 1 year alone is going to drag it down where she's not going to hit anywhere near that in the second term. Which means that in 4 years, with Republicans holding every gavel in Lansing, they got more done than in the 2 years when Whitmer had all the Democrats in charge. So kind of incredible that they were able to get along so well. But when you read stories in the news, it was about Whitmer says this, Republican says that. It was the pillow fight. It was the appearance of conflict when, by the numbers, by the fact that lawmakers had a lame duck session in 2022 after the Republicans lost. Now, who would have a lame duck session when an opposite party governor is in charge and you just lost? That means that anything that does pass is going to be favorable enough to the governor to be signed. Among the things that passed was $85 billion in tax revenue for the Q line, the train to nowhere in Detroit, from nowhere on Woodward Avenue to nowhere on Woodward Avenue. This is Republicans who did this. And so when you see losses, right, like happened in 2022, and you see these late conversions to the Whitmer side and defections from the Republican side, and then even after a loss, the people you sent to Lansing to defend your values decide to gift Gretchen Whitmer a train set on your way out. Next year, the Democrats were going to hold all the gavels. They didn't need your help, Wayne Schmidt. They didn't need your help, Senate Republicans. They didn't need your help funding an $85 million train set through 2039. You gave of that voluntarily. You weren't made to cuck. You chose to cuck. And so this is what happens. And this is why you think it doesn't matter who wins. Because the last time Republicans held all the cards, they became the Republicans for Whitmer. What I need you to understand, though, is that things have changed. So that's why you think elections don't have consequences. Here's how I know they do. Forget what I just said about Donald Trump and all the groundbreaking stuff. That's one man. And notice the congressional Republicans are moving a lot slower because they're still doing the Uni-party pillow fight, where we act like a guy like uh, uh, Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator in South Carolina, is really different from a Chuck Schumer, the Democrat from New York, when in fact they're all pretty much in the same gang. They're all in the same party, and Donald Trump is the one outsider. That's why he's the one guy in either party who has brought a nativist movement to the forefront. We haven't had a nativist party in America. I would say MAGA is a third party, essentially. We haven't had a nativist movement since the 1850s. The first presidential election with a Republican on it, there was actually a look-alike party. There was a look-alike party called the American Party. You might have heard about Elon Musk wanting to start the America Party. So there was a look-alike party back then. And that look-alike was promising nativism, not just anti-slavery, not just we shouldn't do bad things to this group of people who are also children of God. But here's what I'm going to do for you. We're going to keep out immigrants so that actual Americans benefit from America. It was a radical concept in 1856. It's a radical concept in 2026. And it's radical especially among the Republican Party. Last thing I want to mention, why is the Republican, why is the Republican instinct to give in, to cave, and to cuck? When I was in college, I was a big fan of National Review. I went back to the archives at U of M and just found all the ancient issues I could find. And as a history guy, I always go back to the very beginning. So I read that first one, William F. Buckley's first editorial. And the line everyone remembers from there, the only line pretty much, he said the purpose of the magazine was standing athwart history, yelling stop. Do you see how that fits in with the mold of the Republican? Where you're either anti-slavery or you're anti-communist. You're anti-something. You're not for. You don't start with a blank page. You can just read what someone else says and say, okay, here's what I would edit. Here's what I would keep off. And the problem with this mentality is that the culture only pushes further to the left because you're only doing line item vetoes of the craziest things. Meanwhile, they're the ones who have all the ideas. So where did Buckley get that idea from, right? Someone like Trump might say, I want to drive the train. I'm not going to ask some other guy to stop. I'm going to drive the train and decide when it stops, when it goes, where it goes, and how fast it goes, right? So why is that not the Republican instinct? Let's think about the world Bill Buckley lived in. So National Review founded 70 years ago, 1955. This is 70 years. 70 years of go along, get along. 70 years of standing athwart history, yelling stop. 70 years of cocktail party Republicans who only register just enough disapproval to be interesting, but mainly they're there to secure their invites to the solstice party. Don't call it a Christmas party, to the cocktail party. They want to be the one little guy with the red R on his chest who's allowed in that good company, but they don't want to do no Republican stuff. They don't want to do no conservative stuff. So they'll be anti-slavery. They'll be anti-communist, but they won't be pro-you. They can't be. So where did Buckley get that idea that all he could do, that all they could do, any of us could do, is stand athwart history yelling stop? From the world he lived in. From 1933 to 1953, Democrats controlled the White House for every moment of 20 years. That's FDR winning 4 terms. He died early into his 4th term. Truman took over. That's 20 years of Democrats controlling this country. That's 20 years. That's a time for a dynamic to be set in stone, wherein Democrats do things and Republicans try to stop them sometimes. So what Buckley said could have been written in 1935. Standing athwart history yelling stop. FDR, you're going too fast. Please slow down. Oh my God, too much radical change. Please slow down. But you're not starting from a blank page and saying, this is what I want and this is what I'll do. It's the same mentality that led Buckley to say, oh, we should just give back the Panama Canal. Because just, just to show what swell guys we are. Maybe I wasn't born rich enough. I don't really care about coming off like a swell guy. I care about winning. And the reason Donald Trump had to take the Panama Canal back is because left in third world hands, guess what they did? They in the third world, they understand it better than most. That might makes right. What they don't understand and will never respect is weakness and attempts to be reasonable. You show them that you're strong and that this is just the way things are, they say, got it. Whatever you need, Poppy. But if you try to understand them and meet them in the middle and, oh, I'm going to be a decent guy and give you back the Panama Canal, they're going to say, that guy's a sucker. Who else can I sell this to? That's why China came to have so much power over there. So the Buckley frame has failed us. And Trump 2025 is the first step outside of it. That's why this era right now is so important. Trump is proving to us that elections do have consequences. He has steamrolled the bureaucracy. Remember, oh my God, how is he ever going to fire enough people? That wasn't even a challenge. He subdued the judges and the justices. The only remaining obstacle left to the Trump agenda is the congressional Republicans who would not have power but for Trump. Because they grew up in the Buckley framework too, where Democrats try to do things. They have the moral legitimacy to make policy, and all we can hope to do is stop them. And so there's a sick psychology in the Republican Party and in the conservative movement, especially among influencers, where they actually like being out of power because that gives you more of a platform to complain. They like being out of power because then with an Obama, with an adversary, it's just more interesting, right? Whereas if you have a Donald Trump in office who's actually working for you, well, what are you going to do? How's your face going to turn purple when a guy's doing things you like? Your face is going to turn purple when you realize that this stuff was always possible, but the people we elected didn't have the character and the mindset to do it. So Bill Buckley, rest his soul, and his work is ongoing. I wish we could all say the same. It's an incredible legacy, but we do have to move past that. We do have to move past that mentality of standing athwart history, yelling stop. Donald Trump has shown that you can actually change the course of history. You don't have to ask someone else to pull the brake. You can control the whole thing. So that's why elections have consequences. Donald Trump has really restored our faith in democracy, because for so many years it felt like it didn't matter who won. Think about the 2012 election. I mean, Mitt Romney, right? Mitt Romney ends up being your candidate after the Tea Party. Mitt Romney so worried about decency that he couldn't press the gas and beat an entirely beatable Barack Obama because he was so worried about coming off decent and not wanting to be too mean to the first black president that he just let him win. That's not good enough. I don't care about your decency. I don't care about the appearance of decency. I care about my family, and I care about your family. So this is why it matters who you vote for and how you vote and who controls things, because this stuff does affect your life. So I get why you might think it doesn't, but read the events of 2025. I just showed you it absolutely does matter.